He didn't plan to cry. That much was obvious to everyone in that clubhouse who witnessed it. Ben Rortvedt is not a man who performs emotion for an audience. He is not someone who has spent his career cultivating a public persona built on visible feeling or dramatic personal moments that translate well to cameras and highlight packages and the social media cycles that feed on athletic vulnerability. He is a catcher. Quiet. Prepared. Professional in the specific, unglamorous way that catchers are professional, built for the work rather than the attention, oriented toward service rather than visibility, most fully himself in the moments when nobody is watching him because everyone is watching the pitcher he is receiving. He did not plan to cry. But when he stood in that clubhouse and said Ohtani's name out loud, when he tried to put language around what the last 48 hours had meant and what tomorrow represented and what it felt like to be chosen, something broke through the composure that he had spent 13 years in professional baseball constructing. And the room, which had seen many things, went completely still. Andrew Friedman spoke first that morning. The Dodgers' president of baseball operations does not typically appear at the kind of media availability that accompanies a catching acquisition, even a significant one, even a 3-year contract, even a move that carries the organizational weight this one carried. His presence in that room was itself a signal. The kind that people who cover baseball for a living read immediately and correctly. This was not a standard transaction. He stood at the podium with the composed authority of someone who has made thousands of roster decisions and has developed the ability to communicate the significance of each one without overstating or understating what it means in the larger context of what the organization is building. He said, "I want to be direct about something this morning because I think directness serves this situation better than the language we typically use around acquisitions. Ben Rortvedt is here because Shohei wanted him here. That is not the full story of how this happened. There were evaluations, negotiations, contractual considerations that went through the normal organizational processes. But the origin point of this transaction was Shohei. He identified Ben. He communicated that identification to us. And we moved." A reporter asked, "Are you saying Ohtani chose his own catcher?" Friedman said, "I'm saying Shohei expressed a clear preference and we honored it. Whether you call that choosing, yes. Effectively, yes. Shohei chose his catcher." The room absorbed that. Then Friedman said one more thing before stepping back from the podium. He said, "In my years running this organization, I have learned to pay close attention when Shohei Ohtani tells you something. He does not speak without reason. He does not express preferences casually. When he identified Ben, I wanted to understand why. And when I understood why, I wanted to make it happen as quickly as possible." He paused. He said, "Tomorrow is why." Robert spoke after. He confirmed the start. Confirmed Rortvedt behind the plate. Confirmed that the preparation between pitcher and catcher had already been underway for 2 days, longer than the contract had been official, longer than the announcement had been made, because Ohtani had requested that the work begin before the paperwork was finished. That detail landed in the room with the specific weight of information that reframes everything around it. He had requested that the work begin before the paperwork was finished. Robert said, "That tells you what you need to know about where Shohei's head is." He wasn't waiting for the announcement. He wasn't waiting for the press conference or the jersey ceremony or any of the formal markers that tell the outside world that something has happened. He knew what he wanted. He started building it immediately. That's who he is. A reporter asked, "How have the 2 days of preparation gone?" Robert said, "Ask Ben." He smiled slightly. Then said, "Actually, wait until you hear from Ben. I think what he has to say is worth waiting for." Rortvedt entered the room last. He walked in with the unhurried quality that had characterized every public moment since his arrival, the groundedness of someone who is exactly where he intended to be and has made peace with everything it took to get there. He sat down. Adjusted the microphone. Looked at the assembled reporters with the open, direct expression of someone who has nothing to manage and nothing to conceal. He answered the early questions cleanly and completely. The contract. The preparation. The mechanical specifics of what he and Ohtani had worked through in their 2 days together, the pitch sequencing philosophy, the communication protocols for high-leverage situations, the specific sign system they had developed that was already, after 48 hours, beginning to feel like a language rather than a code. He was precise. Thoughtful. He spoke about catching the way catchers speak when they have thought deeply about what the role actually requires, not as receiving pitches but as creating conditions. Not as executing a game plan but as authoring one in real time with another person who is doing something extraordinary 30 feet in front of you. And then a reporter asked the question that opened the door. The reporter said, "Can you tell us what it was like the first time you addressed Ohtani publicly in the clubhouse? When the team was assembled?" Rortvedt was quiet for a moment. Not the strategic quiet of someone deciding how much to reveal. The genuine quiet of someone returning to a memory that still had texture and weight. Then he said, "I want to try to explain this accurately. Because I think it deserves accuracy." He said, "When you have been in professional baseball as long as I have, when you have worked your way through the levels, through the injuries, through the years when nothing goes the way you planned it and the career you imagined feels like something that belongs to a different person in a different life, you develop a relationship with expectation that is different from what you had when you started." He paused. He said, "You stop expecting certain things. Not because you've given up. But because the sport teaches you, repeatedly and without sentiment, that the things you want most are not guaranteed by wanting them. That you can prepare completely and compete honestly and still spend years in rooms where you are not the person being chosen." The room was very quiet. He said, "And then something happens that you didn't expect. Something that arrives not because you stopped wanting it but because the work you kept doing in the years when nothing was happening finally reached the person it needed to reach." He stopped. Collected himself. Then said, "When I stood in that clubhouse and I looked at the team, when I understood that I was being introduced not just as a new acquisition but as the person Shohei had chosen, specifically, by name, for the most important assignment on this roster, I tried to say what that meant." His voice changed. Not dramatically. Not with the performance of emotion. With the quiet, involuntary shift that voices make when what a person is saying is reaching something deeper than the words themselves. He said, "I tried to say what it meant to be chosen by him. What it meant that someone of his caliber, someone who could have had anyone, who had every option available to him, looked at what I do and decided that what I do was what he needed." He stopped again. Longer this time. Then said, "I didn't get through it. I got about halfway through what I wanted to say and then I couldn't continue. Because the feeling was bigger than the words I had prepared for it." He looked down briefly. Then back up. He said, "I cried. In front of the team. I'm not embarrassed by it. I think it was the most honest thing I could have done in that moment. And I think, I hope, that it told Shohei and told this team something true about what I am going to give to this." What Ohtani did in that moment, when Rortvedt's voice broke and the room absorbed the reality of what was happening, was something that every person present would later mention when describing the day. He didn't look away. He didn't shift in his seat or redirect his attention or create the small, socially protective distance that people sometimes create when someone near them is experiencing something publicly vulnerable. He looked directly at Rortvedt. And he nodded. Once. Slowly. With the specific quality of acknowledgement that communicates not just "I see you" but "I understand what this costs you and I honor it." It lasted approximately 2 seconds. It was the most important 2 seconds of the entire press conference. Friedman was asked afterward whether he had anticipated the emotional weight the day would carry. He said, "I anticipated that it would be significant. I didn't fully anticipate how it would land in that room. But I'll tell you something, when Ben stood up in front of this team and that happened, and I looked at Shohei's response, I understood something more clearly than I had before." He said, "The right choice isn't always the one that makes the most analytical sense. Sometimes the right choice is the one that produces a moment like that. That reveals something true about who these people are and what this is going to mean." He paused. Then said simply, "Tomorrow can't come fast enough." Roberts closed the afternoon with something brief. He said, "Ben cried because it meant something real to him. Shohei chose Ben because Ben means something real to him. And tomorrow, when they walk out on that field together for the first time, when Ben gets behind that plate and Shohei toes the rubber and they look at each other across 60 feet of baseball, all of that meaning